Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I wanted to give my thoughts on White Mage so far in Stormblood. Now keep in mind, this is by no means a guide. I just play White Mage casually for things like Extreme Primals, normal mode raids most of the time. For that reason, I also don't have any melding advice or anything. I saw a bunch of White Mages leaning towards crit, but that's not really advice. I just assume for occasional procs or one of the passives, but also for the bonus healing damage. Whatever, that's not what this video is about. White Mage was the center of a lot of attention pre-Stormblood launch in terms of what its changes were going to be. And there was a lot of fear about what the drop's power level would be with them pushing it into this pure healer type of role. Obviously, people's opinions have adjusted a little bit and they're focused on one of the other healers a little bit more now in terms of being underpowered. But I wanted to provide my thoughts on White Mage because it is the first healer I've decided to level to 70, and it was the one that was such a cause for controversy pre-Stormblood launch. So like I was saying, before the expansion launch, White Mages were the potential laughing stock of the game. Everyone saw their new changes, pretty much came to the hyperbolic conclusion without seeing any sort of context or actual use in content that only their new ability Thin Air was going to be good, and that they were even worse off than they were pre-Stormblood. To be fair, without all the information, it kind of looked like that. I mean, not even just considering the fact that they still didn't have any sort of raid-based utilities other than their healing being the primary thing, they lost a lot of things innately from their job. Stoneskin was completely removed, as was Stoneskin 2. Shroud of Saints, Divine Seal, Cleric Saints, and Protect were all shoved into role action, some of them under new names. So many skills that for years belonged to Conjurer and White Mage, held exclusive to them, were now there for everyone. To be fair, some of these skills people were just cross-rolling anyway, or cross-classing anyway back in the day, but it was still really weird to be like, well, now I gotta use this roll action to get back this ability that I already had before the expansion started. There just seemed like no hope for White Mage pre-launch. What ended up happening is that we now have White Mage having like near infinite mana, the highest throughput healer with strong individual single target and AoE damage output to boot. Some of the changes definitely ended up panning out better than a lot of people expected. For example, healers now scaling their damage off mind and not intelligence led to Asai's now always dealing full damage and healing to everyone in range while also granting the MP like it did before. Pair this with a shorter cooldown plus potentially even shorter cooldowns from lilies and its power just skyrockets. And this is only one of what I like to call the holy trinity of MP restoration skills that White Mages get. On top of the Asai's, White Mage gets Thin Air, removing MP costs for 12 seconds. Most of them also use Lucid Dreaming, which is the roll action that replaced Shroud of Saints. Really, you need it for the Enmity, even if you didn't need it for the MP anyway. Pair this with a slew of off-global cooldown healing. You have Tetra, you have Asylum. Asai's also does provide healing on top of the MP. Benediction, the frequent use of Divine Benison to produce a shield, and they're pretty much mana batteries now, except they don't give it to anyone else through any way except healing. If your party has anything like Refresh from a Bard or a Machinist or Mana Shift from one of your casters, you're going to actually have a hard time burning through your MP on anything that pretty much isn't Savage level content. Or maybe the Duty Finder if you have to res like, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. It happens. And by the way, you may not have even noticed, I didn't even mention free cure procs, which also technically play into their MP values. That's mostly because I don't really see White Mages use Cure 1 that much anymore. It's on occasion, but most just go straight to the Cure 2 for the lilies. The MP efficiency of forcing lilies for shorter cooldowns on your off-global cooldowns ends up making it an easy choice. You're either forcing yourself to get some additional MP value for your Cure 2 off the shield for Divine Benison, a guaranteed increased value as opposed to Cure 1, which is the 50% increased value. You could shorten the cooldown on Asai's, which means you get more MP for the rest of the fight. And then on top of that, you just have your other healing cooldowns, which the more frequently you get them by forcing a lily, the better it's going to be in terms of how many of those you get throughout the entire fight. So I mean, I just don't see Cure 1 used that much anymore whenever I'm doing like Duty Finder content or stuff like that. Even if Cure 2 overheals for quite a bit at times, it can be used in conjunction with Divine Benison to produce a shield for a tank buster on short notice. Like let's say a tank is missing like 2,000 health, but he's going to get hit by a massive tank buster shortly. You use the Cure 2 and you end up overhealing a ton, but you're guaranteeing the Divine Benison value for 15% of their max HP. So it ends up making up for a lot of that lost MP value through the overhealing. Not saying you should force yourself to overheal, that's just one applicable use. There's also Plenary Indulgence, I guess, which admittedly is the most disappointing new thing about White Mage. So it only has a 20% chance to proc one Confession stack on a Cure 1 or Cure 2 on a target, and it makes it infrequent. It's just you don't use it as part of your planning for raid damage. Not like, well, let me just spam Cure on you to get Confession stacks, and then spam it on everyone to get Confession stacks so that I can do it maybe later. You pretty much just do it whenever you actually get a Confession stack and you could use some free healing. I mean, when you do proc confession stacks. I mean, that adds to the MP efficiency of Cure 2 if you do get it, basically feeding you another MP free heal on any target that actually has confessions. Then we have some of their other abilities, especially the roll action ones. Largesse, or Largesse, however it's pronounced, the ability that replaced Divine Seal and roll actions. It's as effective as before. I mean, you pair it with a regen, Medica 2, pretty much anything, and it renders healing checks nigh impossible to fail. The thing is, it's just not only for white mages now. That doesn't mean that White Mage hit like a perfect point. It's definitely fulfilling that pure healer fantasy role, and it's fulfilling it in spades, but that doesn't mean that they nailed everything. White Mages are, as ever, enmity magnets. Even with Lucid Dreaming, it can be pretty easy over a fight to over-generate aggro and, take an auto attack or a tank buster. Other party members using enmity tools hold high importance when a White Mage is present, especially if tanking in a DPS stance. I love you, ninjas. White Mage also still provides no direct combat buffs to allies. Its power is strictly through its healing efficiency, meaning that in situations where that efficiency isn't required, the job loses a lot of its value. Luckily, they do have strong personal DPS output, able to use Presence of Mind to either hastily output damage or healing. Their DPS is also incredibly MP efficient now. Overall, I leveled White Mage first just because of the pre-launch backlash that it received. I saw the damage output in the level 63 dungeon when I was at the Media Tour, and I just like, what, for 4-man dungeons, does any of the criticisms really matter? It still has, especially after Scholar nerfs, it has insane AoE output in damage. It has insane healing for dungeons. So I was like, I'm going to level that first, because that's what I'm going to be doing while I'm leveling dungeons. There's nothing like throwing on a Largesse plus regen on the tank, while you swift cast Holy, Assize, Arrow 3, Presence of Mind, Presence of Mind before the Arrow 3, most likely. Presence of Mind, Arrow 3, Holy Spam. It's just, you do so much damage in dungeons. Things just fall over. And with things like Thin Air, using those with the Holy Spam, and then you still have your Lucid Dreaming, you basically can start a fight with no MP, and by the time you end the fight, you'll be at full MP. Whereas it's almost always the opposite, pretty much, in any other scenario if you're not playing White Mage. And you know what, even if you're DPSing as a White Mage and the tank dips low, Cure 2, Divine Benison, Tetra, put the Asylum down under them, Benediction if you just want to, throw on that one big cure. It just, everything just moves so fast and so fluid with White Mage, and I love it. That being said, though, as much as I kind of gave like a general overview on White Mage and like how I feel the abilities interact, there are some other things that bother me that aren't just plenary indulgence. Lilies, they're functional, but they're so boring. I can pretty much just remove lilies from my UI on my screen and play the job exactly the same, which just doesn't click for me. It just feels so added on and pointless, as functional as it is. And of course, I already said plenary indulgence. It's like such an underwhelming level 70 skill. I mean, who wants to get a skill level 70, get super hype, you just got max level, here's a skill that you will use 1 out of 5 times it will proc, and only on these 2 spells. I mean, when you get the confession stacks, it works fine, but just both of those aspects are just so unfulfilling. You literally have 3 different procs on Cure 1 and Cure 2, not including the actual like free cure and over cure. I don't even remember what the Cure 3 proc is called. You get Lily's Confession, sometimes flat CDR on Assize or Asylum. It just feels like there's so much RNG built on top of these 2 spells that I could just live without. The Lilies on just the Cure 2 end up working out okay, but everything else just feels so tacked on and unsatisfying. And despite all that, the job's performance is above average despite these things. A testament to their goal of making it that pure healer fantasy. It's basically the samurai of healers, being so clearly more efficient at just this one thing, while lacking utilities to directly improve the team's output. Some would argue increased healing means the other healer has more time to contribute more through either personal buffs or damage or something like that. But again, this all comes down to different groups and different play styles that all function in different ways. It would just be nice to be able to contribute something a little bit more other than healing. But that's what the other 2 healers are for, I suppose. And that's something you also have to keep in mind as well. That's the whole point of creating a fantasy on one job. It just makes it so that the other jobs, it's not like they're all exactly the same, which is something people complained about back in Heavensward. Obviously, you have role actions like Eye for an Eye, Addle, Rescue, if I can really say that with a straight face, as well as standard like Combat Res, Divine Benison Shields. Those are all technically utilities, just none of them are sexy, nor are most of them exclusive to White Mage. I'd like to see some gameplay changes to Lilies or Confessions, just to make them more fun, even if you want to not necessarily make them bring, like, raid DPS or something. Just make them more fun. That's what they should be, is fun. But other than that, good job to Square Enix, considering, or should I say specifically the dev team, considering the amount of flack that they were getting for White Mage before the launch and how well it ended up playing after the launch. But anyway, yeah, those are just some general thoughts on White Mage. Like I said, not a pro at it by any means, but I feel like whenever you're reaching out to sort of a broader audience like you do with an MMO, it is important to maybe get all perspectives on it. I have a lot of fun playing it, and I really feel like I got to touch the other healers at this point and see how I feel about them after I play them. Scholar would probably be next on my list because the whole reason I leveled White Mage in the first place ended up being kind of the same reason you would apply to me leveling Scholar next. So I got to go apply myself over there. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. I believe I'm going to be doing Paladin Thoughts next. That's my next 70, and I'm currently in the process of practicing Palace of the Dead 1 to 200 solo on Red Mage, and as such, I'm actually beginning to level it. It's almost 60 at this point, just for me soloing Palace of the Dead. So it's got a little ways to go, but I'll see what if I'm leveling Red Mage or Bard next. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.